Hi guys, so today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on skin texture, and I'm going to do it on this belly plate because I feel like it'll be easier to demonstrate on, but I will show you what I do with creases, and you'll just use that same technique on creases on limbs, between fingers, things like that. Today I'm using a mixture of Genesis satin varnish and Genesis matte varnish. My preference actually is to use a combination of satin varnish and Genesis thick medium, but I only have about a teaspoon of thick medium left, and I use thick medium for eyebrow hairs on my eyebrows. So I'm not going to be using thick medium for skin texture anymore, unfortunately. Although if you do have a lot of thick medium gives the absolute best texture. And it's only the old formula. The new formula, thick medium, is not thick. It's like the consistency of thinning medium, so that will not work. You want to use old formula. Even the varnishes of the new formula Genesis are pretty much like honey. They're not going to work for this. So the brush that I'm using, I don't know what brand or number this is or anything, but it has very, very firm bristles, and this is what you're going to want to use for mixing. It just makes it easier, something that has really firm bristles. So for this, I'm going to use mostly satin varnish. And if you don't have Genesis matte varnish, you can also just use satin varnish by itself. Works really nicely. I like mixing a little bit of matte in so that I don't have to varnish it after I do thin texture. I don't have to matte it. So I just take a nice clump there, and it's probably a bit too much for this, but that's okay. I have a jar over there that's already mixed that I use, so I'm just gonna add this back. But this would probably be enough for one baby if you were doing an entire baby. And then my matte varnish, I'm going to use a little bit less. So you can see that is the satin and that is the matte. And then I'm just going to go ahead and mix that up very well. I don't want any little clumps or anything. I want it to be really well incorporated. You don't add thinning medium, you don't add thinner. You want to use this straight for best texture. Alright, and when I use this regular cosmetic wedge, I just tear the top off. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to brush some of my mix onto my cosmetic wedge. You could see it's basically just a thin layer. And I just start, at the top. And you just pounce it a couple times. And I'm really sorry, this cosmetic wedge is really firm. I don't know how this got in with my other wedges, but it's not the right wedge. You want a wedge that's a little bit more squishy, not too squishy, but a bit squishy. Alright, this will work better for me. So again, just putting it on there. And you're just going to pounce the texture on. And I don't know if you could see this. You'll be able to see it better when I get some more going. Basically, the more times you pounce it, the less texture you're going to have. So I just pounce it a couple of times, basically. And you'll be able to see when you need more. You'll pounce it, nothing will come on. And you just do this a whole bunch of times. And while you're pouncing the texture on with the wedge, you just want to look and make sure that you don't see any lines from the sides of the cosmetic wedge. If you do, you can just go ahead and, pounce to blend the line in. And the pressure that I'm using is a little bit firm. I push it pretty much almost all the way down and then back up. And I just do, as you could see, really short, quick pounces. And let's see if I can get sorry about that, the lighting to show this texture a bit. Sorry, it's really textured everywhere, but it's kind of hard to get to show up on film with the lighting and everything. And I have a little clump right there that wasn't mixed in well, so I just kind of grabbed it with the end of my sponge and then pounced a little bit better. And I will say, there are a lot of air dry products out there for skin texture. I have tried pretty much every single brand that they make, specifically for reborning. Kabelka, Reborn FX, Ultimate Fusion. They all make skin texture mediums, 3D mediums. And I've also tried a lot of different mediums with Golden, or from Golden Liquitex, different varnishes, all kinds of stuff. Pretty much everything ever made you can imagine that I've tried it. And I will say that there are no air dry products that are comparable to Genesis for skin texture. Most of them I have found leave a white film. The ones that do not leave a white film, they just don't leave good texture. The texture will look good while wet, but the second it dries, all your texture is gone. So I'm interested, if anyone else, with Genesis being discontinued, I'm pretty nervous about what I'm going to do when I finally run out of Genesis completely and you can't get it anywhere. So I'm definitely curious if anyone tries any other air dry products that are decent. And I know there are a lot of new heat set products coming out as well. Most of the heat sets I have seen, I've tried Phoenix, I've tried the BC heat set, and they all really seem like air dry products to me with a heat set agent. They are not solid like Genesis is, so they don't leave the same textures. I didn't like either of those two for paint at all. I know some people do. But as of, as of the date of this video, I have not found any product that's even close to being comparable. Alright, so I have texture on the whole thing. Hoping you guys can see that well enough, at least in some areas will show up so that you could see the texture. And so what I do for crease areas, like I said, you can do this for in between fingers, any creases on the hand. But you basically want to use whatever brush you're using, and you want to clean it off so there's only a tiny bit left. And this is going to be just like you would do for varnishing, pretty much. Since I do use varnish for texture, this is my varnish layer. If it's not matte enough, I might do another varnish layer, sort of, with just matte, and I would mix that with thinner until it's really, really thin. I don't want it to mess up the texture that I've done, and if you do use another varnish on top of it, like in a creamy consistency or without pouncing so that you're getting a texture, you will cover up some of the texture. Okay, so on my brush, I just pounce it into areas that there's creases. And you want to make sure that you're not leaving any in the crease that's going to dry white or flaky. And sorry about that, I just put a little piece of fuzz on here. Fuzz or little hairs will absolutely seal in here and be very difficult to get out. So you just want to make sure that you get any of those. So I just hit my brush pretty much like I would with the stipple layer, and just do it around the crease so that it's in the crease and it blends. And then I just give it a little once over and see if there's any areas that I missed that I want to get a better texture on. And there's one little area right there. And I'm just making sure that I have the edges of the belly plate well. Alright, and I have one more small hair right here that I definitely want to get off. And then I'll just do one little pounce there just to blend that in if I left a line from my toothpick. Alright, so that looks good to me. Hopefully you can see that well. Okay, for skin texture, you bake immediately. You do not want to let this sit. If you let this sit to dry, the varnish, it will start leveling out. After you bake it, you'll find most of your texture has disappeared. So I do this and immediately throw it into the oven. And you're going to want to bake this the same as if you were varnishing. You're going to want to bake it 3 times, letting it cool completely in between. Alright guys, so that is it. Simple for skin texture, and I hope someone found it helpful.